So to detox pesticides from the body, it's not really about some magical supplement or some detox smoothie or detox teas. It's really about understanding how the body wants to get these things out of the system and then giving those pathways a boost to allow the body to function the way that it wants to function. And the problem is we're all exposed to pesticides today through our air, water, and food supply. So if you're a human and you've ever eaten anything that was grown, or you've eaten the meat of an animal that ate something that was grown, or even if you're really careful, your neighbors are still using pesticides. So we're all exposed to this. And the problem is that, some of these pesticides are water soluble, but a lot of them are fat soluble, which means that they can get into our cells and they can even cross the blood-brain barrier and create a lot of trouble. And when too many of these toxins accumulate in the body, we start to see issues like fatigue and cognitive decline and nerve and muscle issues, chemical sensitivities, and even skin type issues. So we really want to get these out of the body, and we want to understand that the body uses 3 phases in this detoxification process. So phase 1 is the transformation phase, where it's basically taking these compounds and kind of breaking them apart into these intermediate compounds so that they can be neutralized and removed from the body. And it does this by using a family of enzymes called CYP450 enzymes. So basically the body's just trying to transform these toxins into a substance that can be dealt with by the body. And then phase 2 is called the conjugation phase, where the body's actually going to put an extra molecule onto these intermediate compounds so they can be neutralized and removed from the body safely. And then phase 3 is the elimination phase, where we're going to remove these conjugated toxins that are now water soluble through our bowels or through the kidneys. So yay for the toilet. So what we want to understand is that the body is doing this anyways. Like, you don't have to sign up for this kind of cleanse. This is how the body does it. But there are things that can go wrong in each phase of this process, and there's steps that we can take to give it a boost and help it work a little bit better. And the real problem is that a lot of people that do put effort into helping this detox pathway work a little bit better, they do things in the wrong order, which can create more harm than good. So we'll talk about the right order to do things. But let's look over here at this study. It's okay if I'm standing in front of these studies. I'll have links to all these studies in the description below this video, so you can dig deeper into this if you want to, and we'll make them big when we talk about them. Like this study here on glyphosate suppression of cytochrome P450 enzymes and amino acid biosynthesis by the gut microbiome, pathways to modern diseases. And we'll just talk about glyphosate here, but there's a variety of different pesticides that we can get into the system. But in this study, they say we have found clear evidence that glyphosate disrupts gut bacteria and suppresses the CYP enzyme class. So this class of enzymes that the body is using to get these toxins out can actually be suppressed by these toxins. So they go on to say that residues are found in the main foods of Western diet, comprised primarily of sugar, corn, soy, and wheat. Glyphosate's inhibition of cytochrome P450 enzymes is an overlooked component of its toxicity to mammals. CYP enzymes play crucial roles in biology, one of which is to detoxify xenobiotics. Thus, glyphosate enhances the damaging effects of other foodborne chemical residues and environmental toxins. So even these other toxins that are coming into the system, these other pesticides and other toxins that we are exposed to in the world, can be more problematic if these things like glyphosate are restricting these particular enzymes from working properly. And just remember, in this first phase, when the body is using these enzymes to transform these toxins, we're actually making the compounds worse. So if a person is trying to detox too hard in this phase 1, or maybe phase 2 or phase 3 are not working correctly, now they're magnifying these amount of toxins and they're going to feel worse. They could have a lot of symptoms of this excess detox going on just because these other systems are not keeping up with this phase 1. So when we look in phase 2 at this conjugation phase, there's different types of pathways that the body uses to get different type of toxins out. And there's a glutathione pathway, a glucuronidation pathway, a sulfation pathway, and a methylation pathway. We're going to look a lot at this glutathione because that's a really important one when it comes to pesticides. And then over here in phase 3, the biggest problems that come about is that if someone is not drinking enough water to help more of these toxins get out through the kidneys and flush those out, if someone is constipated, or if someone's bile is not flowing correctly. So the liver takes a lot of these toxins when it's done here with phase 2, and it'll put them into our bile that it makes. The bile is this soapy substance that is stored in the gallbladder, and it helps us digest our food. It helps us break down dietary fats and a lot of other benefits from that. But the bile also carries a lot of those toxins out. The problem is it's very common for someone's bile to become too thick and sticky to flow correctly, and then it's not flowing out. And then the liver puts the toxins in there, but the toxins don't go out the back door when we poop like a champion because the bile is not flowing correctly. So now these toxins get reabsorbed, they get reassimilated into the system, and then the liver's got to filter them out all over again. It's like, hey, I did this already. Why are you giving me this again? So we want to make sure that bile is flowing correctly. That can be a really big deal because if it's not, and we push too hard on either of these phases, now we're going to create trouble because these toxins don't have anywhere to go. So some common signs of bile not flowing correctly are things like a light-colored stool, or common nausea, or trouble digesting fats, or maybe a loose stool or diarrhea type issues, skin or acne issues. There's other signs that can show up, but those are probably the most common. We'll have a link in the description below for our video on 10 signs of poor bile flow that dig a little bit deeper into that if you think that might be a problem for you. But that really has to be fixed before we can do any of this other stuff, or you're just going to make yourself feel a whole lot worse. Now, constipation is another issue because, again, if that stool is not going out, then all those toxins get reassimilated back into the system. So if you're constipated, you have to fix that. The great news is that you can. We hear from people every single day that fix chronic constipation that they've been dealing with for decades. And it's usually about a lack of stomach acid, so that food is not being acidified correctly and it will move slower, or they're not drinking enough water, or the body's dealing with an imbalance that's pushing water more to the kidneys and not enough to the bowels, or some type of dysbiosis issue can do that too. But if you're constipated, we'll have a link in the description below for our video on fixing constipation for good. And you really have to dig through that. If you really need help and you're really stuck on that, I'll also have a link from my book Constipation, Kick It Naturally, below, and that's available on Amazon, but the link in the description below will give you that whole book totally for free, and that'll walk you through the process of fixing that constipation. It has to be fixed or none of this other stuff is going to work. So one other thing here is we want to make sure that we're drinking enough water, not only to help the toxins flush out of the kidneys, but we also need water to fix constipation issues. The problem is we like people to qualify to drink more water. I don't want somebody just chugging a gallon of water if they don't have enough minerals in the system to allow their body to function correctly. Now they're going to wash out the small amount of minerals they have, and they're really going to feel lousy. So you can just look at your blood pressure with a blood pressure cuff you pick up at a pharmacy, and if that top number, that systolic number, is below 112, that can be a sign that minerals are going low in the system, and you might not want to increase water a whole lot until you fix that problem. We'll have a link to our video on increasing minerals in the body if that's a problem for you. But water can be very important. I just don't like to tell everybody, drink more water. It's just not right for everybody. We need to look at the individual to know what's really going to be right for them. And if somebody has some kind of dysbiosis issue, that really needs to be corrected because there's certain types of bad bacteria that can take these water-soluble toxins that the body set up so they can be removed through the system, and they can take those water-soluble toxins and turn them back into fat-soluble toxins. So they go right back into the system and the liver's like, hello, I did this. So that needs to be corrected if that's a problem. So when you're putting effort into these 3 phases of the detoxification process, we really need to start with phase 3. We need to make sure these things are working correctly, or this is just going to create trouble over here. So next, let's look at the trouble that can happen here on phase 2. And when we're really looking at this glutathione pathway that we want to use for the conjugation, to make this glutathione, which is one of our body's main antioxidants, we really need 3 amino acids: cysteine, glycine, and glutamine. And we gain these amino acids when we consume animal proteins. We can get some from other sources, but if someone's not eating animal proteins, they're going to have a hard time accessing these amino acids. So one of the problems here in this phase 2 can be either depletion, where someone is just not making enough glutathione to keep up with the problem, or these building blocks for the glutathione are being depleted and the body is not accessing enough of those. This is often about someone not eating enough protein or sulfur-rich foods like, onion and garlic and eggs and such. But in a lot of cases, this is about someone's inability to break those proteins down. If someone is dealing with that low stomach acid issue like we talked about over here, you can't break down proteins into amino acids. We need enough stomach acid to do that. So the most common issue that we see when someone is not getting the amino acid that they need is that they're dealing with some kind of low stomach acid issue, which is very common. If someone's stressed or their body is stressed, that can restrict the body's ability to produce that hydrochloric acid. Millions of people around the world turn off stomach acid on a daily basis, on purpose. So it's very common to see low stomach acid, and when that's the case, you can't access these building blocks that make this glutathione happen. Now the body's going to have a hard time conjugating these toxins into these water-soluble toxins that can be removed, and now phase 2 isn't operating correctly. So we'll have a link in the description below for our video on 10 signs of low stomach acid if you need to figure out if that's a problem for you. Now when we look at trouble that can cause phase 1 to be problematic, phase 1 needs oxygen and specific minerals in order to make this happen, like iron and zinc and copper. And an interesting thing about iron is that we need to have enough stomach acid or we can't access iron from the food that we're consuming. So we're seeing this is really pointing to low stomach acid issues a lot. And oxygen is important too, and a lot of people are dealing with oxygen utilization issues and have no idea. So one way that you can just get an idea if this might be a problem for you is just to relax and set the timer on your phone for a minute and just try to relax and breathe normal and count the number of inhales that you take in 60 seconds. So not inhale 1 and exhale 2, just count the inhales. And if that breath count is lower than 12 or higher than 19, there can be some problems with your body utilizing oxygen correctly, which would disrupt this phase 1 process. So if you get one of those numbers lower than 12 or higher than 19, then go in the description below and check out our video on understanding oxygen utilization issues, and that'll help you understand how to improve that scenario. But another problem is competition going on in this phase 1, where other things can come into this system and compete for these enzymes that are being used to kind of break these things apart and set them up for this neutralization. Things like alcohol and caffeine and even common pharmaceutical medications can all compete for these enzymes and create like a bottleneck situation. Inflammation can be another issue that can actually down-regulate the production of those enzymes. And then we have to think about liver overwhelm, especially when these phases are not working correctly and especially when bile is not flowing. Now the liver is being asked to do those jobs over and over again, which can overwhelm the liver and restrict its ability to do all the jobs that it's supposed to do. And with phase 1 and phase 2, another problem can be just a mismatch in how effective one might be working. If phase 1 is working very well and phase 2 is not functioning correctly, maybe someone doesn't have enough amino acids, now there's going to be more toxins than this body can deal with, which is going to create a lot of symptoms. Which is why we like to see people really make sure phase 3 is working correctly, and then what can we do to boost phase 2? And I don't usually like to see people, supplementing with all these amino acids, but cysteine is the one that's usually a little bit harder for the body to access. Glutamine and glycine are more readily available in foods as long as a person has enough stomach acid to break proteins down into amino acids. But cysteine is a little bit harder to access. So what we can do is we can look at increasing the number of cysteine-rich foods that we might be consuming, like chicken or turkey breast, eggs, beef liver, and some plant sources could be like seeds, lentils, or chickpeas. And a lot of people will supplement with NAC or N-acetylcysteine, and maybe they'll use like 600 to 1200 milligrams per day. And I'm not telling you what dose to take. I'm just sharing what I found in these studies and such that people have used successfully. Remember, I'm not a doctor. I'm not giving anybody medical advice. I'm basically a professional stand-up comic turned nutrition author, because when I lost my voice for 8 years and 23 different doctors couldn't figure that out, I had to dig for my own answers. So now for 20 years, I've been teaching health professionals in more than 40 countries how to help their clients fix the actual underlying causes of problems instead of just covering up the symptoms. But I'll have those studies in the description below so you can dig through those and find the right questions to ask your doctor. And a lot of people will also use some selenium to help this process, and even just like 100 micrograms per day can be beneficial there. And 300 milligrams of alpha-lipoic acid can also be beneficial just to kind of trigger the production. And when we look at supplements and things that could help phase 3, it would depend on what you needed, whether you needed to fix constipation or you needed to fix bile flow. And a lot of people will say, well, should I supplement with some fiber? And fiber is really not the way to fix constipation. It's not the answer for constipation. But if someone can fix the actual underlying causes of the constipation, then some fiber could be beneficial to help push toxins out of the system. But we like to see people just get fiber from eating vegetable sources, so that can usually be good enough. So when we have phase 3 working correctly and phase 2 is doing okay, we're making sure that we can break down proteins into amino acids, we're not having low stomach acid symptoms, then we can look over here at phase 1 and we can start to give it a gentle boost. We really want to be careful here and not be too aggressive. So the main thing that people will use successfully are B complex vitamins. This seems to trigger this phase 1 into action, and if someone started to take some B complex and the symptoms were really getting magnified, well then you've pushed phase 1 too hard, or maybe phase 2 and phase 3 are not working as well as you thought they were, and you would want to back off on pushing this a little bit. Now when we're ready to go into phase 1 a little bit harder, we want to make sure the body's got enough magnesium and zinc, and also antioxidants like vitamin C or a little vitamin E, just to help protect the liver as it's creating all of these intermediate compounds that can create a lot of trouble if they're not being neutralized over here fast enough. So having these antioxidants available is a nice little safety net that we can do when we're pushing this phase 1 a little bit harder. So even though the body does these phases in this order, when you're working on these, we really want to go in the reverse order. Make sure that this is working correctly in here and then here. So I hope that helps you understand ways that you can help the body optimize its ability to detox these toxins. And since this bile flow issue is pretty much the most common and the biggest issue for most people when the body cannot get toxins out of the system, you can jump over right now and check out our video on 5 ways to improve bile flow. I can't wait to hear about your results.